Welcome to Conversations with the Author, Caught in the Crossfire by Liz Godwin, an historical romance novel set during the Boer War in 1900. In the war-torn Orange Free State of South Africa, a tender love story unfolds. Join us weekly for readings from the story, followed by Conversations with the Author, where we delve a little deeper into the story and pull out some behind-the-scenes details. Please note that this content is for educational and entertainment purposes only. All pictures and photographs contained in this video are for illustrative purposes, and although they depict similar circumstances, not all of them come from the Boer War. Photographs and images are used under fair use policy. Let's begin.
De Wet. Just when matters could not get any worse, De Wet captured Sannesbos, about 28 miles east of the city of Bloemfontein. He had destroyed the pump station from where water was pumped into the capital, which cut off the water supply. The hospitals were as jam-packed with the sick as the cemeteries were with the dead. Ada fought for her husband's life with strength and determination that would have amazed him. Her life began and ended in the ward, where Dr. Anderson made his rounds whenever he was able. He warned Ada that now that Felix was in the 3rd week of his illness, she had to be extra vigilant. "This is when the complications occur," he told her. "The delirium will continue, but that's not the worst. Look out for the signs of intestinal hemorrhage and possibly even of pneumonia." Ada was close to tears. Dr. Anderson put his hand on her shoulder. "Don't give up now. You're doing so well. He'll pull through. I'm sure a young, strong man like that, who has everything to live for. Oh, yes, whatever you do, give him lots of water to drink. He'll pull through, I'm sure. A young, strong man like that, who has everything to live for. Oh, and yes, whatever you do, give him lots of water to drink." Then he examined the other British soldier, Lieutenant Robbie McInnes, and to her amazement pronounced him well on the way to recovery. She was delighted. As one of her patients made his way to recovery, another took his place. "It's never ending," she said. "Conditions are awful," agreed Dr. Anderson. "And I was talking with Dr. Conan Doyle, a fellow British doctor. He says that the total number of cases of typhoid could not be less than 6,000 or 7,000. He has confirmed what we all know, that it is not easily treated. Patients suffer the most persistent and debilitating fevers, and they require careful nursing. Nurse Ada, I commend you for your work. When I first met you, you nearly fainted in my arms. I never dreamt I would ever say that to you." Ada laughed. "That was a lifetime ago," she said, "and the girl who fainted was one of the first casualties." "And look how you've transformed this ward," he said, with an admiring look at the scrubbed walls and the ordered appearance. "So keep up the good work." With a smile and a cheerful pat on the back, he left her. Ada was pleased with what Dr. Anderson said. She smiled. He didn't know about her secret weapon, daily pails of milk and fresh produce from Jannie's brother's farm. Jenkins appeared to be on friendly terms with Jannie's brother's wife, whom he referred to as the missus. Sometimes Jenkins even brought water from a spring on the farm to supplement the meagre supply allocated to them at the hospital. Lack of water was the worst effect of De Wet's action in blowing up the pump station. Felix showed no sign of getting better. With a heavy heart, Ada dragged herself into the ward. It was the 4th week since he had been taken ill, and the fever was not abating. Or was it? Over the next few days, she realized that Felix's temperature was slowly coming down. Her heart and spirit lifted. Her husband was going to recover. Then came the day when he grabbed her hand as she bent over him. He was pale and very thin, and his red gold hair lay flat on his head. "Sit," he said. In his voice there was an echo of that commanding tone she knew so well. "Tell me what happened to me." She tried to describe his illness to him and reassured him that he was now on the mend. He had been fever-free for 2 full days. "I must get up," he said. "It's time to get back to work." She smiled at him, her heart bouncing with joy. However, it was a while before he could even get out of bed. One day he made a supreme effort and swung his legs from under the sheet that covered him. "Let's go for a walk." After a few paces he was panting. She helped him back to the bed. Each day he walked a little further. When they got back to the ward, Felix lay in the bed, watching Ada. Her hair had grown, and the golden curls had become waves that brushed her cheeks as she worked. She looked up and saw his eyes on her. "Are you all right, my husband?" "Yes, my wife. I am feeling languorous." "Languorous? What does that mean? I've never heard that word before." She tipped her head on one side, looking at him out of the corners of her eyes. I had forgotten how blue her eyes are. "It means indolent." She gave him a blank look and pursed her mouth. He burst out laughing. "Lazy, my girl, lazy. Just as you will be if you keep up this idle chatter. All I want to do is flop around and do nothing." "Oh, is that all?" A smile of relief swept over her face. "Languorous and indolent. I imagined some dread disease had taken hold of you." She walked over to where he lay and lifted his head in her arms, holding him gently against her. He smelled her clean, fresh flesh, and a tiny flicker stirred within him. She shook out his pillow before lying him down on it again. "You have a nice sleep now, and then we will try for another walk this afternoon." "Seriously, Ada? I'm feeling pup, as you Afrikaners so elegantly phrase it. I have no energy." "Only to be expected. You have had a bad month." Felix held onto her arm. He pulled her down on the bed. "Well, kiss me better then." Ada bent her head and planted her lips on the corner of his mouth. There came that flicker again, this time stronger. "That didn't do it. Once more, if you please." This time her lips covered his. He felt their soft energy as they moved over his mouth. "There now, Felix. I can see you have taken a turn for the better. Now sleep." He shut his eyes, a smile playing on his lips. He fell asleep to the sound of Ada bustling round the ward, humming happily to herself. After a while he could help her do the rounds of the patients in the ward. She worried he seemed quieter and slower than he had been. He watched with admiration the way she worked, quickly and efficiently, and her friendly tone with the men. They all seemed to adore her. True to his word, Felix was on the road to recovery. Each day he got stronger, and the stronger he got, the testier he became. He was no model patient. Ada, let me do that. You're spilling the medicine. Felix, you're not being a good helper. It's time you got back to Dr. Anderson's team. When he got back to work, there was joy in her heart as she slipped back into her role of indispensable nurse, ready to jump to his commands. Felix, however, was aware of a subtle difference in their relationship. Ada still followed him faithfully, but there was a new assurance and independence in both her body language and her attitude. Take the time when he prescribed 10 drops of carbolic acid for the latest victim of typhoid, a young British lieutenant. Ada had looked up at him. "I think you mean 5, she said cheerfully. He turned and looked at her, amazed that Ada not only knew that he had made a mistake, but that she would query his instructions. She had learned so much in such a short time. She stood her ground and gazed steadily at him, confident that she was correct. "Yes, of course, you are right. 5 drops, he said. 5 drops it is, Ada said, and moved to the shelf to get the medicine. Felix strode over and grasped her arm. "Wait, did I say 10? "You did," she said. Her tone was without censure, and Felix felt an unaccustomed embarrassment. "I am sorry," he had the grace to say. "Let's hope that doesn't happen too often." They both laughed, and the incident was forgotten. He looked at Ada with a new respect. Vacation. One morning, Dr. Anderson caught up with them on their exercise walk. "We have to send some soldiers down to the hospital ship in Durban Harbour," he said. "The Maine is leaving for England on the 8th of June, and I have no doctor I can spare to travel with the soldiers. Would you consider going with them? A favour for us doctors here, and a small vacation for you." "We'll have to get straight back," Felix said. "No question of that," Dr. Anderson agreed. "We need you here. There is an alarming shortage of doctors." And so they put Felix and Ada in charge of a white train with its compartments for the patients and nurses. There were impressive large red crosses painted on the outside. The white paint and the red crosses were to show the Boer commandos that this was a hospital train, and that it should not be ambushed or derailed or otherwise attacked. There were 20 patients, some seriously ill, and Felix and Ada were kept busy. It was going to be a long, arduous journey as the railway line went via Pretoria, but the train was well supplied with equipment and all medical necessities. As he made his rounds one morning, Felix fell into conversation with the patient, the British soldier, Lieutenant Robbie McInnes, whom Ada had nursed when both Robbie and Felix were suffering from typhoid. "This is a fine railway carriage," the lieutenant remarked. Felix was surprised at his interest in trains. "It is superior to the train we boarded in Lorenzo Marx, bound for Bloemfontein, when we, the German Red Cross, first arrived from Berlin." "Ah, yes, that railway line was built by the Netherlands South African Railway Company, commonly known as NZASM. Did you know it was completed only 5 years ago? What an achievement! Completed with no infrastructure, just hope, and the determination to establish a much-needed railway system for this landlocked republic." Felix stared with interest at his knowledgeable patient. Robbie McInnes smiled. "It's funny to think that project is, in a way, responsible for us being here today." He was full of random bits of information. Because the Netherlands had so many of their people over there working on the railway, they had to establish a medical scheme for them. That was a first for the Transvaal. And again, when they realized the war was about to break out, the Netherlands constructed well-equipped ambulances that they sent out here to assist the Boers. I've heard that, Felix said. The aid from the Netherlands has been wonderful. It has included ambulance trains to the Transvaal Republic and, of course, the service given by their doctors. They also transport personnel and goods free of charge. The ZAR government took control of the railways at the end of September, just 10 days before the war was declared, the lieutenant said. And here is the unbelievable thing. In the next fortnight, they constructed 4 complete ambulance carriages in the NZASM workshops in Pretoria, under the direction of the Swedish engineer Axel C. Ugler. They performed this task efficiently, with great attention to detail, and, on completion, donated the carriages to the ZAR government. How do you know all this? Felix asked. And why do you find it so interesting? Before I joined up, I worked on the Cowlairs Railway Works in Glasgow, Scotland, McInnes said, as did my dad before me. It was the first works that built locomotives, carriages, and wagons in one factory. Dad was there when the North British Railway Company took it over in the 1860s. You joined up to fight when the war broke out, did you? Felix asked. Were you a factory worker? Yes, I was. It was the company's football club that made me join them, McInnes said with a big smile on his face. The area where I lived was growing rapidly because of its importance to Glasgow's railway industry. Our dads formed the club, and if the truth be known, that is why I went to work there. And since then, football has been my life. Ada came up and stood at Felix's elbow. Felix, I'm worried about Robbie, she said. There's a problem. He's sicker than he should be. And what is this? McInnes asked, in the half-bantering, half-flirtatious way he often addressed her. Are you the doctor now? Well, you've been my patient for over a month. I think I know you well. I feel I'm missing something. You indeed cared for me, and many times I thought I was going to die, he said, his voice low, and blatant admiration in his eyes. It's a miracle worker you are, lass, and an angel, inside and out, so sweet and gentle, and knowing just how to make a fellow comfortable and ease his pains. Felix was a bit taken aback. That Robbie McInnes spoke so glowingly to Ada and about her was a novel experience for him. Up till then, Felix had seen Ada as an extension of himself, and not as a caregiver in her own right. While with the German Red Cross team, they had regarded her as a minion. Ada seemed quite unmoved by her patient's ardent tone. Well, thank you, she said. Felix looked at Ada in amazement. This was a side of her he had not seen before. She was no longer the helpless waif that he had rescued. She was confident, and he saw that there was more to her than he had previously believed. After she had left them, McInnes said, She's a nurse in a million, that one of yours. And if you don't believe that, ask any of the men here on the train, or in the hospital back in Blom. Robbie tried to get out of his bunk. As his right leg touched the floor, it buckled under him, and he collapsed with a scream of agony. Felix rushed to kneel beside him, wondering why he had such pain. 2 orderlies came running up. Lift him back onto his bunk, Felix said. "Where does it hurt?" he asked, and Robbie indicated his lower abdomen. When Felix inspected the area, he saw nothing to indicate a problem. However, it was very painful when Felix gently palpated the area. In his mind, Felix was transported back to the classroom, listening to the lecturer's voice drone on about the history of appendicitis. Had he listened attentively enough? "I need Dr. Kuttner here now. What am I going to do?" Panic rose in his throat. He turned to Ada. "You were right," he said. "There is something else wrong with Robbie McInnes. He has an inflamed appendix. He needs an operation, and I am going to need your help to perform it. Do you think we will manage?" She used the same argument as he so often used with her. "What's the alternative?" she asked. "That's the thing. If we do nothing, he will die. But if I operate, he might also die. I know the surgery, and it could be very tricky under our present circumstances." "You can do it," she urged, "or at least try. Doing nothing won't help him. Let's do it together. You tell me what to do, like when I first started helping you." Felix hardly recognized this young woman, so in control, so determined on the action that he should take. She was utterly different from the timid little nurse he used to bark orders at, never expecting her to have any input into his decisions. All the same, he felt as if he was moving in a nightmare into unknown territory where he seldom strayed. But is it such a leap? I did basic training in general and abdominal surgery earlier in my surgical residency, so why do I feel this operation would tax me? He shook his head. "I'll think about that later. Now, first things first." He sat down and forced himself to walk through the steps of the operation he was so anxious to perform, calling on knowledge that was deep in the recesses of his brain. He willed himself to be calm and to give his hands the skill they needed. Then he sat down with his patients. "Robbie, I promise I will do my best for you, but I have to warn you that there's a bleak prognosis for this operation. I have to perform it because it is the only chance I have to save your life. But it's up to you to say if I should proceed or not. What do you say?" Robbie looked at Felix's anguished face and gave a laugh, which quickly turned into a grimace of pain. "Ow!" he yelled. "That was painful. Don't make me laugh, mate. Are you more deadly than a company of Boer commandos?" Felix looked puzzled, and then smiled at Robbie's attempted humor. "Be serious," he begged. "I have to tell you that I am relatively inexperienced, but I will do my very best for you." "Just do it, Doc," Robbie said. "I have every confidence in you." He shook Felix's hand. It was a long and arduous operation. Cautiously he proceeded, checking and rechecking every move. Dissecting down through the various layers, he finally reached the appendix, which was inflamed and swollen. Meticulously he tied off the base of the appendix and dissected the offending organ with the scalpel. Once that was done, Felix breathed a sigh of relief. The appendix had not ruptured. Efficiently he stitched the layers back together and then closed the skin. The operation was over, and his patient was still alive. He handed Robbie McInnes over to the care of the nurses and left the operating room, mentally exhausted. "Thank God we got him through that." He walked away, silently celebrating the miracle worker who had guided his hands. Felix nodded at Ada. I'm so glad you're on my team. She beamed and nodded back. She's growing more assured. She is amazing. He had a brief flashback to the emaciated, huddled little body that was his first sight of Ada. As he studied her now, seeing the way she moved so competently, carrying out her duties, he was overcome by the contrast. Although she had put on some weight, she was still slender, but no longer the emaciated creature from the lager. She turned and looked at him, as if aware that he was regarding her, and the deep blue eyes sparkled. His mind went back to his Pygmalion imagery. Yes, my Galatea is fast becoming a lovely human being. Meeting Lady Churchill. After numerous stops to restock the supplies on the great hospital train, they finally reached their destination, Durban, in Natal. The railway line ended at the docks. The hospital ship, Maine, was awaiting the patients that Felix and Ada escorted, and transferring them to the ship was quick and easier than expected. The night before the hospital ship left, Felix and Ada were invited to dine with Lady Randolph Churchill at the Durban Club. "We are so grateful for your help," Lady Churchill said. It was a pleasure and a privilege. Felix was at his most charming. She studied him approvingly. The dreadful battle with typhoid had left him extremely thin, and his skin was translucent white, startling against his red gold hair. They dressed as best they could, Felix in his workaday clothes and Ada in hers. She had wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, but it was not an elegant garment at all. She looked and felt quite out of place. "We will leave tomorrow," Lady Churchill explained, "but I'm afraid that the arrangements for you to return by train to Bloemfontein have not worked out as we had hoped. Lord Roberts is planning to move out of Bloemfontein, and all the trains are packed with supplies for him. I had booked your passages, but they have been cancelled. I apologize most sincerely." Ada imagined being trapped here in this alien environment, never able to return home. She cast an anguished look at Felix. He too was concerned. "We are needed at the hospital," he said. "Conditions are desperate, and there are few doctors or nurses to cope with the epidemic." Lady Churchill nodded. "We are aware of the problem," she said, "but in the meantime, I'm going to have to ask you to make the best of this situation. I have found a beachfront cottage for you, where your meals will be provided, and I have spoken to the owner of the Durban Club, who has given you temporary membership. As soon as a place becomes available on a northbound train, you will be notified." "That's very kind of you," Felix said. "It's all arranged, my dear," she smiled. "The luggage has been sent down to your beach cottage, your meals are taken care of, and an urgent request has been put in for you to receive tickets to the north as soon as possible. All you can do is await events and enjoy yourselves in the interim." With that, she swept them into the dining room, where they met many of the Durban dignitaries and enjoyed a huge and sumptuous banquet. Felix found himself quite at home, but poor Ada became shyer. Otto's words came back to her. "You are from different worlds. All you will do is hold him back. You will do him a great disservice to marry him." For the first time she comprehended what he had meant. It was true. She certainly was not an asset to him in this company. She saw herself as she must have appeared to the other guests, just a shabby little Boer Macy in old, worn-out clothes. The noise in the room got louder and louder. She was tired, and the feeling of being out of place grew. The women were so elegant that she felt intimidated. More and more strange and exotic food appeared in front of her. She was overwhelmed. Suddenly the sound of a tinkling bell called the whole dining room to order. The waiters cleared the last of the main course dishes, and the assembled company sat back in their chairs and looked at the top of the table where Lady Churchill stood. We leave on the Main tomorrow, the 8th of June, for England, with 190 patients, and we hope to disembark on the 3rd of July. It's going to be the last voyage for this wonderful ship. I've been asked to say a few words about the Main and how it came into being, she said. She looked around the room. Every eye was riveted on her. She smiled as she spoke. The project was simply conceived. I was talking one day to a friend, a fellow American, Mrs. Blow, the wife of the manager of a South African mining syndicate. She interested me in the idea of a hospital ship. I then formed a committee of American women in London to raise funds for the project, and we raised £41,000. The young man on Felix's right turned to him. "She is the most amazing woman," he whispered admiringly. "Won't take no for an answer. Just like her son, Winston." "Oh, the journalist," a man on the other side of Felix whispered back. "I've heard he's a very strong-minded young man who always gets his way. He was captured by the Boers when he was fighting with Buller's forces in Natal and made a prisoner of war, but he escaped last December." The men carried on with their quiet conversation together, not wanting to interrupt what Lady Churchill was saying. "He's in the news again. He was present at the release of the 129 British officers and the 39 soldiers imprisoned in Pretoria by the Boers." "Yes, that was after the occupation of Pretoria on the 4th of June, just 3 days ago. To many, this signals the end of the war. Already there is talk of going back home to England." Felix sat in his chair, agog at this conversation. This was all new to him. He had heard none of this as he had been on the train with his patients. Such an extraordinary happening. Roberts marched into Pretoria, and there was no opposition. After all those skirmishes with the enemy. Suddenly, the men noticed an unnatural silence in the room. All eyes were on them as they chatted among themselves. "Sorry for that interruption." The young man sitting next to Felix stood up and made a graceful bow in Lady Churchill's direction. She smiled at him and blew a kiss. "Talking about my son, I think. A subject of endless interest to me, of course." Returning to her previous topic, she continued, "Then we had a rare piece of luck. Bernard Baker, the founder of the Atlantic Transport Company of Baltimore, donated the Maine, which was an old cattle boat of 3,000 tons. As if that was not generous enough, he agreed to maintain it at his company's expense." Spontaneous clapping broke out, which she acknowledged with a smile. "Yes, I agree. That was more than generous." Felix's confidant leaned towards him. "She's the one who made that happen. Unbelievable." "Well, my committee went into action. Within 2 months, we had fitted out the Maine with the latest that medical science could offer. It provides accommodation for 218 patients in 4 large wards and 1 small isolation ward. It contains X-ray equipment and an operating theatre that boasts an enameled iron operating table with a plate glass top. And there is a dispensary. One of the most remarkable things about the Maine is that it flies both the Union Jack and the Stars and Stripes. It is believed to be the first ship ever to sail under these 2 flags, and it also flies the flag of the Red Cross. Thunderous applause greeted her. Some men even banged on the table with enthusiasm. She waved graciously to silence the audience. Then, to Felix's intense embarrassment, she said, "It would be remiss of me not to draw your attention to our Red Cross representative, Dr. Felix Varning, who escorted our patients from Pretoria." She gestured to Felix to stand up, and the applause swelled. He stood, feeling mightily embarrassed, unaware of the picture he made in his dark suit that accented his lean body. His red hair shone in the light from the dark chandeliers suspended from the ceiling. Ada, watching him, fought the twin emotions of pride in him and shame for the pitiful picture she presented. Not knowing of the turmoil in his new wife's breast, Felix could only smile and bow until Lady Churchill clapped her hands and ordered the dessert to be brought in. Felix sat down. The young man who had been talking to Felix introduced himself as John Carr, and his wife, Lucy, who was sitting on the opposite side of the table, 2 chairs down from Ada. Lucy was a petite, vivacious young woman with lovely long black hair that fell in ringlets on her shoulders and down her back. She wore a spangled yellow gown. She was a picture of elegance and confidence. Ada was enthralled by her. Lucy seemed to be the epitome of all that Ada could aspire to. Lucy viewed Ada with her sweet face and gentle manners as a potential friend. After dessert, the 4 of them drifted off together, and the 2 men talked animatedly while their wives listened. "Do you think the war is over with the occupation of Pretoria?" "This is all news to us. We received no word of the war during our time on the train. But no, Steyn and de Wet will never let that happen." "There's been a good deal of military pressure on the Boer republics in the last few weeks. I wonder where it will end." Roberts tried to trick the farmers in the Transvaal into laying down their arms, as he did in the Free State. He promised amnesty, but nothing changed. "And did you know he has renamed the Orange Free State the Orange River Colony?" "No, I didn't know that." "I am sure that now he has occupied Pretoria, he will dissolve the 2 Boer republics," Felix said. "I fear that what will happen is that the Boers will, more and more, resort to guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run raids, as they did after the occupation of Bloemfontein. I doubt that the war will be over soon." "I agree, so all the more reason for you to have a short break from the battlefield horrors that you've been dealing with. Join us this coming week," John Carr said. "It's time we gave the yacht a whirl, isn't it, my dear?" he asked his wife. "It certainly is," Lucy agreed. "And we are very delighted with her. She's called Spirit of the Wind." "So you're from around here?" Felix asked. "The 3rd generation," John Carr answered easily. "My grandfather owned one of the first sugarcane plantations that started in the 1850s. We couldn't get the Zulu to work the fields, Not their thing at all, old boy. So my grandfather and the other plantation owners brought in indentured Indian labor. We now have a thriving Indian population in Durban. And we have wonderful bazaars with a variety of merchandise, Lucy Carr said. I bet you plan to go shopping for Ada tomorrow. Well, I can help. I know all the best places to shop and all the best dressmakers. She said it all so kindly and so matter-of-factly that Felix could not take offence. He heard Ada's indrawn breath and took her hand in his, giving it a reassuring squeeze. That's a good plan, Lucy, my love, John Carr approved. Turning to Felix, he said, We'll pick you up at 12 tomorrow. I know where you're staying. Then perhaps we could go out together on Thursday and do a tour of the coastline in the yacht. It was arranged so easily, and John and Lucy were so friendly and welcoming that Felix and Ada could only fall in with the plans. The dinner party was breaking up, and everyone was dispersing. Their new friends bid them farewell, promising to see them the next day.
We have just been listening to Caught in the Crossfire by Liz Godwin. Now we switch over to Liz and her husband Rob for some more details. Welcome, Liz, and thank you for being with us today. So, Felix had got married and Dr. Kuttner was really mad at him. And then he was sent away, wasn't he? I'm trying not to say COVID. They got typhoid.
Yes, typhoid.
Typhoid. And they were sent down, where was it, to Durban?
Well, Felix got typhoid and Ada nursed him and sort of grew in self-confidence and so on. And then he was still very weak and they needed someone to take a hospital train because they had these amazing hospital trains down to Durban, I think.
They were amazing. How so?
Well, that they were so magnificently fitted out. They had really top class bunks and room. What do you call it? Where you can do the
operating
theaters. And they were very well equipped.
So it was like a moving hospital, you're saying?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Amazing.
And so where did those come from? Were those shipped over to South Africa on ships from Europe, especially for the war?
I was going to say yes. I'm not actually sure. I know that in that chapter about the hospital train, they talk about the railway engines and railway carriages being manufactured in South Africa.
Oh.
So there was a lot going on at that time. But I think they probably came from Europe because, I think it was a new thing. You see, the distances in South Africa are so great, and that was one of the factors. And another was that there weren't enough medical hospitals in different parts of South Africa. They had to sort of either take them down to Cape Town or make some sort of plan. And one of the plans was to ship them back to England. And in England, in Durban, Lady Churchill had this wonderful ship which was a hospital ship, and they took lots of English soldiers back to England. People who were very badly wounded.
Did doctors look after English and Afrikaans soldiers in the same hospital?
Yes, they did in some cases. Not, it wasn't the norm. If they had to, they did it. Yeah.
So Felix was asked to go down because he was sick and he was weak. He was given this job to just go on the train, deliver the English soldiers to the English hospital ship.
Yes, that's correct.
And then they met Lady Churchill on the hospital ship?
Well, not really. They met her
At a different function.
at a yes, at a special function. Yeah.
That was very interesting. I thought that meeting to bring in, to bring in somebody on the British side.
Yes, it was really. She did the most amazing things for the British soldiers. She was a absolute live wire, and her sister-in-law and her son, and I think her husband was her husband. They were all involved in the Boer War. So, yeah, and she must have been a most amazing woman, but she really got things going. She had lots of personality and oomph, drive, and the ability to encourage people to do things. It was a war in two parts. First of all, Buller was there and he went to Natal, but he sort of got bogged down in logistics and things. And so they took the running of the war out of his hands and they gave it to Roberts, Lord Roberts. And Lord Roberts came up and he rushed down the Orange Free State into the Transvaal, and he thought he'd won the war. And so he made ready to go home and he left Kitchener behind. But Kitchener went on for about 18 more months. Wasn't able to tie things up as they all imagined they would be. So it was a war in two parts. One of the features of the Boer War that I found so fascinating is how international it was. That people from all the countries of Europe were interested, followed it. Lots and lots of people came to South Africa, hundreds of people from all over Europe. And also there was this American connection. The whole world was interested in.
So, do you see any similarities between the Boer War and the Ukraine war at the moment? There seems to also be that global interest.
Yeah, there does seem to be a global interest. And also there does seem to be a little man fighting back against a big bully sort of theme.
So, how long did the Boer War go on? It was 2 years, was it?
No, it was more like 3 years. It went on from October 1899 to sometime in 1902.
Right. So it was 3 years.
Yeah. In fact, one of my heroes, which is Christian de Wet, wrote a book called The 3-Year War. A very famous source of what happened, and yeah, it's very quoted, often quoted. Yeah.
You have mentioned before people like Rudyard Kipling and people being there. So I'm imagining that a lot of literature came out after the war.
Yeah, I think so. I think it probably did. And lots of the doctors wrote medical articles that went to the medical journals. And I suppose in a way the Boer War was overshadowed by the First World War. And the Boer War was like a curtain raiser to the First World War.
How interesting. I suppose aggression spreads, doesn't it?
Yeah, it certainly does.
Oh well. It was really, really, really nice having another chat to you. It was really great. And
Oh, thank you.
thank you for listening to today's episode of Conversations with the Author. Caught in the Crossfire by Liz Godwin may be found as ebook or paperback on Amazon.com. If you enjoyed this show and want to support us, please subscribe to the channel and share the video. See you next week. Goodbye.